At 7:14, on a wet April morning, the 6th floor of Calder Memorial looked less like a hospital than a place arranged to reassure wealthy people that suffering, if properly funded, could be made elegant. The new surgical step-down corridor gleamed under recessed lights. Orchids stood on pedestal tables. Breakfast carts waited beside the family lounge. Even the air smelled curated. Citrus polish over disinfectant, expensive enough to suggest that no one on this floor was supposed to raise a voice. Nadia Flores reached the unit with rain on her coat, a canvas tote biting into one wrist, and a cracked phone tucked under her palm. She was 36, slight in the deliberate way of women who spent their lives carrying two things at once, and she wore navy scrub pants under a camel coat missing one button. The tote gaped just enough to show a green metal lunchbox decorated with fading cartoon planets. It belonged to her 9-year-old daughter, Sophia. Nadia had forgotten to leave it at home after packing it before dawn. Against the glass and chrome around her, it looked childish and cheap. That, she knew, was what people noticed first. The second thing they noticed was that she had arrived just as Graham Vale came off the private elevator with his entourage. Vale, Calder Memorial's chief executive officer, moved with the settled certainty that the building would rearrange itself around him. He wore a charcoal suit and a hospital pin. At his shoulder were the chief nursing officer, 2 board members, a donor couple from the Wren Foundation, a communications director already half smiling for photographs, and Ethan Park, the 27-year-old administrative fellow carrying a leather folio and writing down everything. Nadia stepped aside to let them pass. Then she stopped. Room 642's corridor light was pulsing amber, not flashing, not clearing, pulsing in the slow, steady way a call light does when someone has pressed for help and the request has not landed where it should. Nadia glanced instinctively toward the unit secretary's desk. No chime, no corresponding room number on the display panel. The monitor showed 638,640, 645. It skipped 642 entirely. She looked back at the door. A thin strip of blue plastic still clung to the edge of the new wall handset inside the room, the sort installers forgot to remove when a project had opened on schedule instead of after it was ready. On the bedside table sat the welcome folder, meant to explain the unit's services to patients and families. Through the clear sleeve, Nadia could see the laminated emergency card with the printed instruction, "Condition help, dial 77." Calder had retired that number last winter. The operator line now routed family emergency calls through a different extension after the telecom migration. Nadia felt the smallest change in her body, the almost noiseless click that happened whenever scattered details snapped together into a pattern she recognized before other people did. A dead room on the call panel. Old escalation instructions in the folder. Plastic still on the phone. A new floor opening for donors before the safety checks had fully caught up. Nobody in that hallway understood what she had already seen. One small detail had already changed the direction of the day. She moved toward Vale. "Mr. Vale." The communications director turned first, faintly annoyed. Vale followed a moment later, then looked at Nadia's tote, the lunchbox, the damp hair curling at her temples. One of the board members glanced the same way. The donor's wife gave the tiny social smile people used when they had mistaken someone for staff beneath the level they planned to remember. "Yes?" Vale said. Nadia kept her voice level. "Room 642 isn't mapped on the call light board, and the family emergency card in there has the retired condition help number." Ethan's pen paused above his page. Val looked past her toward the room, as if humor might be hiding in the doorway. "Facilities is still finishing cosmetics." "It isn't cosmetic," Nadia said. "If a family member can't reach staff and tries to use that card, the number won't route. If the call light isn't crossing to the console either, that room has no reliable escalation path." The chief nursing officer shifted, already irritated by the phrase "reliable escalation path" because it sounded official enough to be inconvenient. One of the board members gave a soft laugh, not cruel, just reflexive, the way people laughed when a breakfast speech threatened to become a technical meeting. Vale's eyes settled back on Nadia. "And you are?" "Patient relations." "Nadia Flores." Ms. Flores, he said, in the tone men used when they meant to imply both patience and rank. Today is a donor walkthrough, not a failure drill. Please send your note to unit operations. I already sent one last night about missing family-activated help signage on this side of the unit. The communications director exhaled through a smile. Ethan did not look up. Vale's gaze dropped again, just briefly, to the green lunchbox in her bag. Then you've done what your role requires. It would have been easier if he had raised his voice. Quiet condescension was harder to answer in public because it forced everyone else to pretend the humiliation had been administrative rather than personal. Nadia heard a volunteer at the back whisper, "Maybe she's looking for family resources," and someone else murmur, "Daycare's on too." Vale gave the smallest gesture toward the elevators, already turning away. "Please let the unit open before you decide it's unsafe." They thought they were dismissing a tired single mother with a lunchbox in her work bag. What they did not know was that she was the only person in that hall who understood what was about to happen. By the time they realized who she really was, the first people to go silent would be the ones who had just watched him wave her aside. Nadia stood where she was until the entourage moved on. Ethan Park hesitated, looked back once as if he might say something, then followed the others, because that too was part of how institutions trained their young. The amber light outside 642 kept pulsing. Nadia had worked in hospitals long enough to know the difference between a dramatic failure and a quiet one. Dramatic failures got committee names and policy rewrites. Quiet ones passed for ordinary friction, right up until a family used words like, "if only," and no one could bear to answer them. The dangerous part was rarely a single broken thing. It was the seam between 3 or 4 things that each department believed belonged to someone else. Her badge said patient relations, which meant most people assumed her work began after damage had already been done. Nadia translated fear into language the hospital recognized. She explained grievance processes, found interpreters, located social workers, wheelchairs, and cab vouchers. What she handled all day were the first human signs that a system had started to slip. What the badge did not say was that for 11 years before patient relations, she had been an ICU nurse. Before patient relations, she had spent 11 years in ICU. She had been good, careful, fast with lines, steady when rooms turned bad, able to read surrender in a patient's body before the numbers confessed it. What skill could not fix was daycare closing at 6 while night shift ended whenever disaster allowed, or the man who had promised to split everything disappearing into pills, unpaid rent, and selective remorse. By the time Sophia was 3, Nadia was sleeping in fragments. She transferred out of critical care because patient relations kept cruel hours, but at least printed them in advance. The pay was worse. So was the status. She took both losses for one practical reason. She could still reach the school pickup line by 6:15 if traffic cooperated. She did not tell this to men like Graham Vale. Men like Graham Vale preferred biographies that fit inside leadership newsletters. She set her tote on the unit desk and pressed the call button from the empty side of room 642's doorway. The corridor light brightened. No chime sounded at the station. Marin Lee, the charge nurse for the new unit, looked up from her laptop with the concentration of someone managing a morning already over budget. Competent, brisk, and stretched thin, she had spent months shepherding a project leadership kept calling smooth because it had not yet failed in public. "Did you just trigger that room?" Marin asked. "It's not showing on your board." Marin frowned at the screen. 642 isn't active until next week. There's a patient in it. That got her moving. Marin crossed to the room, saw the chart clipped at the footboard and the overnight belongings on the chair, and swore once under her breath. The patient, a post-operative woman named Allison Reed, slept beneath a thin blanket while clear fluid ran through the IV pump. In the recliner beside the bed lay a school sweatshirt and a library paperback. Marin checked the assignment sheet. She was moved up from PACU overflow at 3 a.m. And the room still isn't live. Marin rubbed a hand across her forehead. "It's probably just the console. I'll call Biomed." Nadia lifted the welcome folder. The card inside still showed the retired number. And this? Marin shut the door halfway so the sleeping patient would not hear them. We're waiting on corrected inserts. People were admitted before the corrected inserts arrived. A muscle worked once in Marin's jaw. She knew Nadia was right, which made it harder, not easier. Do not make this bigger than it is before we have facts. In patient safety, this is facts. Marin looked toward the hallway where Vale's group had disappeared into the family lounge. Please, she said quietly, and this time the word held something other than authority. Fatigue, maybe. Fear. Not today. Nadia understood the plea. The unit had taken 18 months, delayed inspections, and a donor pledge large enough to put the Wren family name on glass, visible from the highway. A public problem on day one would hit Marin long before it reached the executive suite. That was how institutions survived their own mistakes. Gravity worked downward. Still, Nadia said, I'm calling operator. She used the wall phone in the staff alcove. The operator supervisor confirmed what Nadia suspected. The old condition help extension in the folders no longer forwarded anywhere after telecom migration. If a family member followed the printed instructions, no one would answer. Can you put a temporary command in? Nadia asked. Not without telecom authorization. Then at least brief your operators. Any call from 6 East saying, condition help. They page rapid response and administrator on duty. There was a pause. That's not the formal workflow. No, Nadia said. It's the one we have. The operator supervisor agreed reluctantly. Nadia wrote down the woman's name, the time, and the exact language of the workaround on the back of a visitor meal voucher. When she returned to the desk, Ethan Park was there alone, reviewing the notes while the rest of the entourage toured a donor plaque installation. Up close, he looked younger than his suit suggested, like a man still hoping hard work could protect him from embarrassment if he learned the rules in time. He looked at the meal voucher in Nadia's hand. Did operator confirm it? She studied him. You heard. I hear most things. I'm trained not to react. It almost made her smile. That sounds exhausting. It's a fellowship, he said, which was close enough to a confession. Nadia found a blank stack of family information cards and wrote in block letters, if you need immediate help and cannot reach your nurse, dial 0 and say condition help to the operator. She wrote 6 before Marin saw. You can't distribute unofficial material, Marin said. It's temporary. It's unauthorized. It's accurate. Marin lowered her voice because Ethan was standing 3 feet away. If leadership sees those, they'll say we opened non-compliant. Nadia set the marker down. You did open non-compliant. The words landed harder because they were not cruel, merely exact. Marin closed her eyes for a beat. Give me 5 rooms, she said at last. Occupied only. Nadia nodded. That was what compromise looked like in a hospital. 2 women with different job titles choosing the smallest illegal thing that might keep everyone alive. Together, they slipped the handwritten cards into the welcome folders of the occupied rooms on the east side. 642, 644, 645, 647, 649, where the telecom mapping was still incomplete. No announcement, no email blast, just paper where paper should already have existed. At 9:05, Vale's walkthrough ended with applause in the lounge, while a photographer arranged him beside the donor couple under the glass name wall. Nadia watched from the corridor. Ethan stood 2 people back, expression professionally blank. At 9:17, Sophia's school texted to ask whether Nadia had signed the permission slip for the aquarium field trip. She had not. Nadia found the aquarium permission slip crumpled beneath pamphlets in her tote, signed it against the desk with Marin's marker, and texted a photo back before returning to work. Hospitals liked to pretend emergencies and ordinary life could be sorted into separate bins. Nadia had never once seen that happen. By late morning, the unit had filled with the mixed weather of inpatient medicine. Meal trays, transport techs, anxious relatives, televisions too loud, the sour bitter smell of chlorhexidine. Nadia moved through it quietly, settling a parking dispute, finding Spanish consent forms, and later bringing Allison Reed's son a phone charger from the gift shop. That was how she met him. Benji Reed was 12, thin at the wrists, with the careful calm of a child, determined not to make adult things harder. His mother had come out of a complicated hysterectomy the night before and was supposed to be sore, tired, and better by the weekend. Benji knew the script because people had repeated it gently since dawn. When Nadia handed him the charger, he said, "My mom keeps asking why the call button outside doesn't stop blinking." Nadia looked at the corridor light over 642. Amber. Still there. "Has anyone answered when you pressed?" He shrugged in the careful way children do when they are trying not to accuse the adults keeping someone alive. Eventually was one of the most dangerous words in a hospital. Nadia crouched so she was level with him. "If you need someone fast, there's a card in the folder by the window. You can use that number too." He nodded once, serious enough to make her want to smooth his hair, and not knowing him well enough to try. At 11:40, she sent a second email to Unit Operations, Telecom, Risk, and the administrator on duty. She attached photographs of the outdated condition help card and the absent room number on the call light console. Subject line, active patient rooms without functioning family escalation pathway. She copied Ethan because junior people were often the only ones who read to the bottom of a thread. At 12:06, Graham Vale replied to all, "Thank you. Please route operational issues through standard chain. We are addressing go-live adjustments in real time. No further distribution of unapproved materials." No one else replied. At 12:18, Marin quietly removed 2 of the handwritten cards from empty rooms and left the occupied ones untouched. At 1:03, an ED surge from a 4-car collision on the bypass filled the elevators with stretchers and forced every charge nurse in the building into staffing arithmetic. 2 float nurses were pulled off the new unit. A rapid response on the floor below took more attention with it. Pressure inside a hospital seldom looked dramatic. It looked like a nurse hurrying past a doorway with medication cups, a unit clerk juggling phones, lunch trays left untouched because nobody had time to collect them. To executives in conference rooms, it looked like operations. Nadia spent the early afternoon mediating a complaint from a family in pre-op whose case had been delayed twice and who wanted the surgeon's last name written down correctly before they agreed to anything else. When she finished, she checked her phone. 2 missed calls from Sophia's after-school program. Her chest tightened. She called back at once. Sophia had forgotten her inhaler spacer in the nurse's office yesterday and had coughed through recess. But she was fine, the coordinator said. Nadia thanked her, wrote herself a note to retrieve the spacer, and felt the usual slice of guilt pass through before habit stitched it closed again. At 2:11, Ethan found her near the elevators. "Mr. Vale wants the handwritten cards removed," he said. Nadia pressed the elevator button harder than necessary. "Of course he does. He says unofficial instructions create liability. The lack of instructions creates corpses." Ethan flinched, not at the word itself, but at how little emotion she used when she said it. "Telecom says the room mapping should be corrected by tonight. Tonight is decorative." He glanced around the hallway, lowered his voice. "For what it's worth, I logged your concern in the walk-round notes. That's not worth much if the notes die in your folder." His face changed then, just enough for Nadia to see that she had hit somewhere still tender. Ambition, probably, and the shame that attaches itself to ambition when you discover how often it asks for silence. "They won't," he said. Nadia reached into her tote, pulled out Sophia's lunchbox to get at the papers beneath it, found another blank card, wrote the operator instruction again, folded it in half, and held it out. "If anyone tells you to remove them," she said, "wait until Telecom fixes the rooms. Not before." He took the card without answering and slid it into his folio like evidence, which by then was exactly what it had become. At 2:39, the world turned fast. Nadia was in room 647, explaining a delay to an elderly man's daughter when she heard a boy's voice in the hall, shouting, not wildly, but with the controlled fear that made her move before the words reached sense. "Hello? Somebody? She won't wake up." Nadia was already out the door. Benji Reed stood in the doorway of 642, with the room phone in one hand and the blue card in the other. His face had gone pale. Inside the room, Allison Reed was half upright against the pillows, eyes open but unfocused, skin gray around the mouth. Her breaths were fast and shallow. The call light button lay on the sheet near her hand. Nadia crossed the room in 3 steps. "Who's on the line?" "The operator," Benji said. "Good." Nadia took the handset. "This is Nadia Flores in 6 East, room 642. Activate condition help and rapid response now. Adult female, acute mental status change, respiratory distress, probable shock. Notify charge nurse and hospitalist." She dropped the phone back into Benji's hand. "Stay with the operator. If they ask anything, say yes until people get here." Then she was at the bedside. Allison's skin was cool. Her pulse hammered under Nadia's fingers. The bedside monitor showed a heart rate in the 140s, oxygen saturation drifting at 88 despite oxygen, and a blood pressure cycling without capturing. The Foley bag held almost nothing. A rust-colored stain had spread beneath the lower edge of the abdominal dressing. "Mrs. Reed," Nadia said, close to her ear. "Can you hear me?" Allison's eyes moved toward the voice without really finding it. "Cold," she whispered. Shock, Nadia thought. Bleeding until proven otherwise. But she hit the staff assist button on the wall out of instinct, even knowing it might not route. Then she reached over, cranked the oxygen up, and flattened the bed while keeping Allison's shoulders from lurching. "Benji, look at me." He did. "Walk into the hall and flag the first person in scrubs you see. Tell them rapid response is coming to this room right now." He ran. The next 40 seconds unfolded with practiced speed. Marin arrived first, then a bedside nurse, then the rapid response team, critical care nurse, respiratory therapist, hospitalist. Drawn by the overhead page the operator had sent through exactly the workaround Nadia had argued for that morning. Oxygen mask, another IV, pressure bag. The dressing came back soaked with fresh blood. Someone called the surgeon, someone else called the OR. The hospitalist looked at Nadia once, clocked the way she was holding the patient's shoulder and tracking the monitor, and understood immediately that she was not here by accident. "Stay," he said. She did, until she was no longer needed. By 2:47 they had Allison Reed moving toward the elevator, pale under the non-rebreather mask. Blood products ordered, OR team alerted for return to surgery. Benji stood against the wall with Marin's arm around him, the phone still clutched in one fist, the blue card bent soft at the edges from his grip. The hallway went suddenly quiet. Graham Vale stepped out of the conference suite at the far end of the corridor just as the bed disappeared into the elevator. He took in the overturned tray, the rapid response residue, Marin's face, the child, Nadia standing with blood on the heel of one hand where the dressing had leaked through. "What happened?" he asked. No one answered at first. Then Benji lifted the wrinkled blue card and said, with the flat accuracy of the newly frightened, "The number in the folder didn't work, so I used this one." The silence after that was not theatrical. It was administrative, clinical, absolute. The kind that falls when every person in a chain of command realizes the paperwork now has a pulse. Ethan Park arrived seconds later, out of breath, his folio tucked under his arm. His eyes landed on the card in Benji's hand, then on Nadia, then on Vale. Nadia watched comprehension travel through him in a series of quick, disciplined shocks. Marin spoke without looking at the CEO. Her call light never routed to the desk. The family emergency card in the room had the retired number. The patient's son used Ms. Flores's temporary instruction card to reach operator. Operator activated rapid response. Vale did not move. From somewhere behind him, the chief nursing officer said, "Is the patient stable?" "Going back to the OR," Marin answered. The hospitalist, passing them on his way after the bed, added, "Another 10-15 minutes, and she might have coded on the floor." There were times when status rearranged itself noisily. People apologizing, blaming, claiming they had always supported the right answer. This was not one of them. Here it happened in stillness, in whose eyes dropped first, in whose hands suddenly looked unnecessary. in who no longer mistook Nadia's silence for lack of standing. Vale turned to Ethan. "Get me the telecom logs, operator recording, room activation records, and the morning walk-round notes. Now." Ethan nodded once and went. Then Vale looked at Nadia. Not at the lunchbox in her tote, not at her wet hair or unadorned badge, but directly at her face, as if finally admitting it contained information he had failed to value. "You were right," he said. Nadia wiped the blood from her hand with a gauze pad someone had left on the counter. That wasn't the hard part. He absorbed the answer without protest. By 3:30, the conference room had been emptied of donors and reoccupied by the people institutions assembled when they could no longer pretend a preventable danger was theoretical. Vale, nursing, telecom, risk, Marin, operator on speakerphone, Ethan with his folio open, and Nadia with Sophia's lunchbox on the floor beside her. The facts came quickly. Room 642, along with 4 other occupied rooms, had opened before their nurse call endpoints were fully mapped after a software transition. Their welcome folders still contained obsolete condition help instructions. Nadia had identified both failures that morning, confirmed the dead routing with operator, and created a temporary workaround card. At 2:39, Benji Reed had used that card when his mother became acutely unstable. Operator followed Nadia's workaround. Allison Reed reached the OR alive. No one attempted to improve the story with softer language. When the telecom manager tried, "Go live sequencing issue," Vale cut him off with a look. When the risk director said, "Fortunate catch," Marin corrected it to, "Reported risk." Ethan wrote both phrases down, which Nadia appreciated more than she expected. At some point during the review, Vale asked, "Why was a patient relations representative the person who recognized this?" There were many possible answers, most of them unflattering to everyone in the room. Nadia gave him the simplest one. "Because patient relations lives where systems fail quietly. We hear about the seams first." The chief nursing officer folded her hands. "You were formerly ICU?" "Yes." "Why did you leave bedside?" Nadia might have refused. She did not owe biography to people who had mistaken expertise for inconvenience. But the room was trying to understand not merely what she had seen, but why she had trusted herself enough to keep pushing after being told, in public, to stand down. So she answered, "My daughter was 5 when her father left for good," she said. "ICU shifts paid the rent, but not childcare that stayed open late enough to survive a code at change of shift. I was sleeping in my car between pickup penalties and 12-hour nights. One winter, Sophia got RSV and stopped breathing in our apartment bathroom while I was trying to find the nurse line number one-handed. I knew exactly what bad looked like. It didn't matter. I was still just a frightened mother telling a stranger on the phone that something was wrong before the stranger could hear it." No one moved. Nadia kept her tone even. She had learned long ago that the most devastating truths sounded almost mannerly if spoken without self-pity. "When I came back to work, I realized the earliest warning often isn't a monitor. It's a family member saying this isn't right. Or a room light blinking in a pattern nobody has time to notice. Or a child in a doorway whose voice goes thin in one particular way. So I took the job where those things arrive first." She did not add what the transfer had cost her in prestige, money, and the future other nurses once expected her to have. She did not need to. The room understood enough. Vale sat back slightly. The motion was small, but it carried the weight of a man discovering the difference between access to authority and knowledge of consequence. "What do you need right now?" he asked. Nadia almost laughed at the phrase, but said, "Pull every outdated family escalation card in the tower. Live verification on every occupied room endpoint before another admission. Written temporary instructions in every room until telecom signs off, and stop opening units to ceremonies before they're open to patients." Ethan's pen moved fast. Vale nodded once. "Done." He looked at her lunchbox then, not dismissively this time, just noticing. The green paint was chipped at the edges. One hinge had been repaired with silver tape. A child's sticker of Saturn peeled up near the latch. "What's your daughter's name?" he asked. "Sophia." "How old?" "9. He glanced at the lunchbox. "My mother worked nights on a floor," he said. "I should have known better." Nadia met his gaze. "And yet?" The words were gentle. They did not need to be anything else. To his credit, he took the blow cleanly. "And yet," he repeated. There was no dramatic apology. None was needed. Recognition, in institutions, mattered more when it altered structure instead of language. By 4 o'clock, admissions to the East Wing were halted. Facilities stripped obsolete cards from every folder, while telecom verified endpoints room by room. By 4:30, an email from Graham Vale ordered that no clinical space at Calder Memorial open to patient occupancy without documented verification of call systems, escalation instructions, and family emergency access. Patient relations would be added to all future go-live safety rounds. Nadia was not copied as a courtesy. She was listed as co-lead for the review. Before Ethan found her, Nadia went down to the surgical waiting room on 2, where the televisions were muted and the coffee had been sitting on the burner long enough to smell burnt. Benji Reed was there with his aunt now, knees drawn up under the vinyl chair, school sweatshirt twisted between his hands. When he saw Nadia, he stood too quickly, as if adults only ever approached children in hospitals to deliver bad news. She sat beside him before the fear could harden. "They took your mom back in time," she said. "That matters." He nodded, staring at the seam in the carpet. After a moment, he asked the question everyone asked in some form, and no hospital ever trained itself to answer well. "Did I do the right thing?" Nadia looked at the half-moon dents the blue card had left in his palm. "You did exactly the right thing," she said. "You noticed, and you called." His aunt turned away then, one hand over her mouth, because gratitude in public was sometimes more exposing than grief. Benji asked whether he had gotten anyone in trouble. Nadia thought of executive suites, donor plaques, and the expensive machinery people built to protect themselves from blame. "The right people," she said. "Not you." He nodded again, as if permission itself could steady him. When the charge nurse from recovery came out 20 minutes later to say the surgeons were still working but had blood in the room and a plan, Benji let out a breath that sounded older than 12. Nadia stayed until his shoulders dropped an inch. Then she stood, smoothed the front of her coat, and went back upstairs, where meetings were already beginning to rename what a boy had plainly saved by refusing to wait. At 4:52, Ethan found her in the family lounge, where she was finally eating half a vending machine turkey sandwich over the sink. The orchids from the morning display stood beside a tray of untouched petit fours nobody wanted now. "Allison Reed is out of surgery," he said. "ICU says she's critical but expected to make it through the night." Nadia let the breath leave her slowly. "Good." Without the conference room between them, Ethan seemed his actual age. "I should have said something this morning." "Yes," Nadia said. He winced. She let him keep the honesty. "I kept thinking there had to be a right way to bring it up," he said. "A sequence. Someone above me." "There usually isn't," Nadia replied. "That's the whole problem." He nodded. "I read the walk-round literature when I started the fellowship. Leadership rounds are supposed to make safety concerns easier to raise." "They do," she said. "For the people leadership is already prepared to hear." That landed. Ethan looked at the edge of his notes. "Mr. Vale wants you on the executive safety rounds going forward. Not as support, as a direct voice." Nadia chewed once, swallowed. "That'll make some people miserable." "For what it's worth," Ethan said. "A few of them already were." This time she did smile, just a little. At 5:07, Sophia's after-school program called again. Nadia stepped into the corridor to answer, bracing for some small domestic collapse. Instead, Sophia came on the line herself. "Mom, Ms. Rita said you had a hospital emergency." Nadia glanced through the glass at the stripped welcome folders piling on the lounge table. "Something like that. Did you fix it?" Nadia looked at the bloodstains still caught in her thumbnail. Down the hall, telecom techs moved from room to room, while Marin stood beside them, and Ethan repeated the family escalation script to operator until every word matched. The floor sounded different now, less polished, more honest. "I helped," Nadia said. Sophia considered this in the thoughtful silence she used when building meanings. "Okay," she said at last. "Can we still have pasta?" Nadia closed her eyes for half a second. The relief in that ordinary question nearly undid her. "Yes, we can still have pasta." When she hung up, Graham Vale was standing a few feet away, holding a revised stack of temporary instructions, now on official Calder letterhead. "We're posting these in every affected room until Telecom signs final verification," he said. "I wanted you to see them before they go out." She took the page. The language was plain, human, and correct. "Need immediate help? Dial 0 and say condition help. If you believe the patient is getting worse and staff are not responding, ask for the rapid response team." It should have existed at 7 that morning. "It's good," Nadia said. Vale hesitated, then added, "Tomorrow morning I'm meeting with the board chair and the Wren family. I'll be explaining exactly why the unit opening was halted. Your name will be in that explanation." Nadia looked up. "As the problem? As the person who prevented a death." There was no triumph in her face. "Then mention the room mapping, the obsolete cards, and the operator workaround too," she said. "Competence isn't magic. It should be reproducible." Vale's mouth shifted, almost a smile, though chastened by the day. "Understood." He started to leave, then stopped. "For what it's worth," he said without turning, "I saw the lunchbox before I saw you. That was my failure, not yours." Nadia did not rescue him with forgiveness. She did not need to. "I know," she said. He nodded once and walked on. By 6:02, the East Wing was re-verified and running under the scrutiny it should have had from the beginning. Nadia signed the interim safety note, returned Marin's marker, and collected her tote. The green lunchbox felt oddly heavy when she lifted it. In the parking garage, the rain had stopped. Nadia sat in her car for a moment before starting the engine. Her phone showed unread emails from Vale's office. Risk, school, the pharmacy reminding her to refill Sophia's inhaler, and an apartment portal she could not afford to open until payday. She drove to the after-school program on streets glazed by leftover rain. Sophia ran out carrying a paper crown and climbed into the back seat, talking about cuttlefish, fractions, and whether pasta counted as a celebration meal if no one had technically won anything. Nadia let the child's voice sand the sharp edges off the day. At home, after pasta and homework and a search for the missing inhaler spacer under the couch, after Sophia had fallen asleep with her paperback tented open on her chest, Nadia unpacked her tote. Pamphlets, a cracked charger, the aquarium slip, 2 pens, a soft granola bar, and Sophia's green metal lunchbox. Nadia opened the lunchbox. Inside, beneath the wax paper crumbs and the empty clementine cup, lay the extra blue card she had made that afternoon and never used. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she folded the card once and tucked it into the pocket behind the lunchbox handle, where she kept spare lunch money and the emergency contact list for field trips. She washed the box, dried it, packed tomorrow's clementine, sandwich, and inhaler spacer, and snapped the lid shut. Her phone buzzed on the counter with a late email from Graham Vale's office requesting she join the Permanent Patient Safety Executive Rounds Committee. Nadia left the message unopened while she wrote Sophia's name on a fresh juice pouch with a black marker and placed it neatly beside the lunchbox for morning. Outside, the city was quiet. Upstairs, her daughter turned once in sleep and settled again. In the stillness of the kitchen, Nadia rested her hand for a moment on the cool metal lid. She had not become valuable that day. Someone else had simply, at last, noticed.